Hey, what's up, guys? Shamrocked here with the dungeon guide for Grim Batol. So this is a Cataclysm dungeon that they've brought back and sort of redesigned a little bit to be in Season 1 of the War Within Mythic Plus rotation. In true Cataclysm fashion, they have made a very challenging dungeon. This is very hard. It's just one giant slog from start to finish. Every pack hurts. Thankfully, the bosses aren't too bad, but it's rough. I could see them doing nerfs. However, based on how they've handled other Cataclysm dungeons like Throne of the Tides and Vortex Pinnacle, it's not going to see a lot of like major nerfs. It's probably going to be one of the harder dungeons, so just keep that in mind. However, it will likely be a little bit different on live than how you see in this beta, just based on hopefully feedback that they've gotten from groups doing this dungeon, just based on how hard it is and how tight the timer is. Before getting into it, I have a very important question to ask you guys, which is please let me know whether you prefer this type of guide where it's literally a start to finish recording of a run that I sort of narrate through, and you really get into the nitty gritty of each pack and you get to see the route and basically any mistakes we make, anything cool, you basically get to see it all. It's a little bit longer of a video. I was worried it would be overwhelming. So that's, if you go and watch my City of Threads dungeon guide, or if you've watched it already, that one is very different. I kind of pared it down. I took the sort of the mechanics that you'll be dealing with for each trash pack and each boss. I tried to highlight them in camera view while just sort of like with a scripted narration of what you're dealing with during the packs and the bosses and all that. So please let me know which one is more useful to you, because they both require different types of editing and time. So I want to make sure that the guides I'm making for you guys are the most useful for you as possible. So just let me know which one you prefer in the comments. I would just really appreciate it, because that'll let me know moving forward which format I can focus on really enhancing and making better. And this is not just for this season too, for the next season as well. So if you could do that for me, I would really appreciate it. If not, don't worry about it. But anyways, with all of that out of the way, let's jump into the talents. So if you're looking for, totemic versus farseer and like how your spec talents are going to interact with your hero tree, I already have a totemic guide. I have a farseer guide. I have a totemic versus farseer guide. So go check those out. This talent overview is really just what I would pick, what's important for this dungeon that I think you should be considering mostly on the class tree. So you're definitely going to want to take your Curse Dispel, Improve Purify Spirit. There are some nasty curses in the second half of this dungeon, and not only are they nasty, there are like a ton of them, so many curses. So make sure you take this talent, and if you have anyone else in your group who can dispel curses, make sure they take it as well. Next we have Seasoned Winds. There are so many interruptibles in this dungeon for fire, nature, and shadow damage, and Seasoned Winds is like insane value. Like, it's so crazy that this is a talent for us. Like, if you keep on your interrupts, which trust me you're going to be able to do because there's so many casts going off in this dungeon, you're gonna have 30% damage reduction in any school of magic for 20 seconds if you do it in a row. Basically forever if you just keep on interrupting off cooldown. And with the same school of magic. So definitely Seasoned Winds, go to talent for this dungeon. Take it if you can. Next, Refreshing Water. So this is kind of a staple of my build. I think 25% more effective healing surge on yourself is very nice. It's really going to help with some of the single target damage that happens towards the end of the dungeon. And then Thunderous Pause. I definitely recommend taking this. It's another staple of my builds. It's just going to help you dodge swirlies. It's going to help you dodge mechanics. It's just very, very nice for positioning. Once again, really nice talent to have for pretty much all context. And then lastly, we have Static Charge, which is your Capacitor Totem cooldown reduction talent. It's just going to get you more Capacitor Totems, more CC. Huge bonus in this place. You're going to need as much CC as you can, trust me. So make sure you're taking Static Charge. You could take Guardian's Cudgel as well. However, what I don't like about Guardian's Cudgel is that it adds to stun DR. Basically stun cap. If enemies get stunned too many times within a short period of time, they become immune to stuns, which can be very, very annoying and detrimental to your group. So Guardian's Cudgel, unfortunately, the way it works really contributes to that. So yeah, I always recommend taking Static Charge over Guardian's Cudgel. That's it for class talents. Once again, for spec talents, I'm not going to go through this. The only one that I would probably mention would be Earth Living Weapon versus Ancestral Protection Totem. So if you're running Totemic, you can run either of these. Earth Living Weapon I find is nice for its own region, because for its own reason. You're going to be getting Earth Surge more often on people, but Ancestral Protection Totem, also known as APT, is also extremely valuable. And just a quick note, not taking Earth Living Weapon does not ruin Imbuement Mastery, because you still have your Earth Moat, which is going to put Earth Living Weapon on the entire group, whether you have it talented or not, so you don't need to worry about that. So pick whatever you want. If you're asking me whether or not I think Totemic is better for this dungeon or Farseer is better, I think they're actually both better in their own ways. Totemic is going to help you with all of the AoE damage that's going out. It just has really good AoE throughput that's easy to access, and it's nice for a lot of the trash packs and the boss is. But the hardest part of this dungeon, in my opinion, is probably the last hallway, where there is a ton of single target damage. So if you take Farseer, you're going to have probably a much easier time with that part of the dungeon. But all in all, like, if you've been watching my videos, I really enjoy Totemic, so that's what I've been playing during the beta. I actually like Farseer a lot more now, after playing Heroic a lot, just because it's really fun to get as much damage out as you can. However, yeah, I don't even know why I'm talking about that, but okay, so with that out of the way, let's jump into the dungeon guide itself. All right, so here we go. Like I said, this is a really challenging dungeon. It's just like a gauntlet of pain from start to finish. So let's get into it. This first pull here is actually quite challenging. So there's a few casters. Mainly have to worry about the Earth Callers in terms of casters. They're gonna cast. They're basically gonna chain cast Earth Bolts, which need to be interrupted in order to like get them in. But more importantly, they're gonna cast something called Mass Tremor. And it's very important that that gets interrupted, because it is a group-wide AoE that slows everyone down and does quite a bit of damage. So if that goes off, especially at the wrong time, you are in for a rough time. The next enemy of concern here is the Twilight Destroyer, which is this big dragon. He's going to do something called Twilight Flame, which is going to target one person, and they're going to continually drop purple stuff on the ground. And this stuff hurts. Like, the instant you step in it, you don't even get a second. Like, it's going to damage you right away. And it was chunking for huge, huge damage. So if you get that on you, you have to make sure you run out of the group and keep moving. Otherwise, it will kill you itself. And then if you don't have it, just make sure you stay away from the people who do. What's really challenging with that first pull is if you fill up the floor with too much stuff, it becomes very rough to deal with. And I'll see if, like, this run, we handled it very, very well. I'll see if I can find any footage of us not handling it well, and then you'll see how rough it can get. But in addition to that, the dragon will also cast, I believe it's called Umbral Winds, and this is just going to knock back everybody while doing a huge chunk of damage. So you have to be careful you don't get knocked off this ring into the center, because you will fall down and die. And you also just have to be careful that you don't get knocked into the black or the purple stuff that's on the floor that I mentioned earlier, because the Umbral Winds knockback damage plus landing on the floor with the purple stuff will probably insta-kill you, so you have to be really careful. The best way to handle the dragon knockback is to just line of sight it. So if you can find a nook or a cranny, or if the tank can tank it on a corner like ours did, if you rewind a bit and see, it makes it really easy to just sort of dash around the corner when they're casting that Umbral Winds, and then you don't have to worry about it. However, one thing we ran into was that if the person who has the Dark Flame debuff, they have to be careful. They can't drop that purple stuff in the same space where people are going to be line of sighting, because if they do that, then the people who try to line of sight are going to die. We also found through, I say we, I did this with so many different random pugs, but the one group I was running the most with, we found the best way to handle this was to make sure that when you start the pull, don't even bother lusting until after the first knockback. So that way everyone can focus on living. It happens like 10 seconds in, so you're not really wasting any uptime. So you just focus on living for that first knockback, activate lust, and then you just burn that dragon down. Then going on to this part, so as I was talking, there were a few more packs. It's basically just casters you have to worry about. So those earth bolts, like I said, you want to interrupt those as much as you can. But more importantly, you want to make sure no mass tremors go off. Otherwise, there are other enemies, I believe it's called the Overseers, that do something called Rive. It's like a stacking debuff that gets put on the tank, and that increases the damage the tank is going to take. So most tanks will be able to handle this no problem. Like I didn't really have any tanks that were struggling to stay alive with that debuff. However, if you're running with newer tanks, or if you're running a really high key, you will need to give extra attention to that tank when they have that debuff, just to keep them alive and keep them safe. Once you're finished all of those initial trash packs, you're going to get to fly a dragon here, and you're basically going to fly around and just attack all of the trash up to the first boss. It's nice to get as many packs as you can as low as possible, obviously. But we found it was better to really focus in on getting a few packs almost to 0%. And then, getting a few other packs to like 50%. And that way, and try to group it up. So if you leave all the packs towards the end up with like 50% health, you can pull them all together and then basically turn, what could be 2 or 3 pulls into one big pull with everything at 50%. So it dies pretty quickly anyways. But basically when you're using the dragon, you have 2 abilities. One, you only get like 4 or 5 charges up. Make sure you use, that's like the big damaging ability. So make sure you use that on the dangerous packs, which would be the packs towards the end, or the packs towards the beginning. There is a pat that walks back and forth. And if you get lucky, when you start to ride the dragon, that pack can be like next to another pack that's on the way. And so what I mean by lucky there is if that happens for you while you're riding your dragon, you can actually shoot both packs at once. And you'll damage both, and that is really efficient if you're able to do that. I don't know if it'll be like worth waiting or holding the dragons. We'll see once Mythic Plus is out and people are really finessing their routes. But until then, it's just something that if you're lucky, then you get to do it. Otherwise, these packs are all the same. It's all the same stuff that you've been fighting. Watch out for the Overseer Rives. Like I said, they're just going to make the tank take extra damage, and then also be watching out for those Osmos Tremors. And this is how you can see where, like at the beginning with the talent section, I said season wins is very important here. Every interrupt you get is going to decrease the amount of damage you're taking from an Earth Bolt, from a Mass Tremor that goes off, what have you. So very, very useful talent here. This first boss, General Umbrus, is actually surprisingly probably one of the easiest bosses out of the entire Mythic Plus rotation, which is and I say surprising because, like I said, this dungeon is brutal. So to have one of the easiest bosses in here is kind of like out of left field. But we will take our wins where we can get them. So basically what this boss is going to do is throughout the entire fight, he's going to put strips of purple on the ground, and this is where dragons are going to fly through and basically flame the area. And if you're caught in those purple strips, those purple rectangles, you're going to die if you get hit, to be completely honest, unless maybe like you're a tank or something. Throughout the room, every time the dragons do like a bombing run, there's always going to be one strip or one area that is not going to be bombed, and it's the one that's obviously not in purple. So the group basically just has to move together into those free zones, into those zones where you're not going to get hurt. While that's happening, the boss is going to be doing 3 things. First is the Commanding Roar, which is basically where this is going to start at the beginning of the fight. The Commanding Roar is just going to do a big burst of damage to everybody. I think you'd have to, like, the damage it was doing on the beta, even on like a 12 or a 13, was not enough to one-shot the group, so I think you'd have to go pretty high before you have to worry about that. But when you do get to that point, obviously it's going to be an ability where you may need like a small defensive on. It's also maybe when you get high enough, an ability that you might want to spec into Spirit Wolf talent, so that way you can go into Ghost Wolf and get a little bit of DR that way, so you don't get one shot. But like I said, you have to go pretty high up for that, so you're at that point you'll have your own strategies. You won't be watching this video, so if you are watching this video, you don't have to worry about that. The other thing he does are these like earth spikes. So he's going to target, I believe it's 3 people, possibly 4 people. However, it never targets the tank, and then sometimes it doesn't target it DPS or healer. Yeah, so here you can see it here. It's 3 people. And they're going to basically leave a spike on the ground, and it's just going to knock you forward a little bit. So you want to be able to strategically place these spikes throughout the fight so that you don't cause roadblocks as you need to move back and forth. This is very reminiscent of the first boss. I believe Chronocar was the name. Yeah, that's it. It was the first boss in Fall, which was the Mega Dungeon from the time Infinite Dragonflight, whatever. It was the first boss where the room kind of fills up with sand and she like leaps around. It's kind of the same idea there, where you just have to like keep as much space open as possible. But anyways, some good tips for that fight. Really, like I said, super easy. Just stay together as a group. Make sure you're not getting hit by those bombing runs. It's a good spot to use Wind Rush. Any other speed enhancing talents you have, obviously you should have a trigger Happy Finger on Ghost Wolf. And if you are someone who specs into Gust of Wind, that is also very useful for that fight. I found as a totemic shaman, it was very easy. Like your surging totem will line up perfectly, like literally down to the second, with every Commanding Roar, which is where most of the damage happens. So as long as you're using your surging totem and Earth Surge windows to get through each Commanding Roar, you should have no issues with the damage at all. Okay, going into this next area, this area is very spicy, for lack of a better term, if you do not handle the interrupts properly. So Each of these packs has a big giant that's going to do AoE as well as really just crank the tank every so often. And then with the giants are packs of casters. The casters are really annoying. They are going to cast a Shadow Flame Bolt at people, which is just going to do a ton of damage if it hits them. They're also going to cast something called Sear Mind. The Sear Mind is going to stun a player. It's basically a channel. So if it goes off, it will start stunning, and you can interrupt it to unstun the person. What really sucks that makes this dungeon really hard, harder than it would have been in previous seasons, is the way that they've changed the way interrupts work, right? So, or CC works rather. So if you have like a stun or a knockup or whatever, and you use it to interrupt a cast, that no longer like fully interrupts a cast. It doesn't count as an interrupt anymore. Every time you stop a cast by just using a form of CC, like a stun or a knockup, the mob is just going to immediately start casting again. It needs to be a solid, real, ground roots interrupt in order to actually stop these guys from casting. And that's with every dungeon with this new season. It's quite a twist. It's very hard to get used to. And even once you get used to it, it's so much harder than it used to be just because you can accidentally screw up interrupts by, like, if I go to interrupt something and then somebody else actually CCs it right before I get my interrupt off, that means I just wasted my interrupt and they're just going to start casting again as soon as the CC wears off. So it's very hard to coordinate. Even in Discord groups, it's hard to coordinate. So oddly enough, this group that I'm running this specific dungeon in, we were not in Discord. This is actually a random pug I got into. And this was just a really solid group, so we didn't really have to worry about it. As you're doing that, the boss, which is Thorongus here, Forge Master Thorongus, he's going to pat around the room. So if you want to clear all the trash before you engage him, just make sure that you're staying off to the side so you don't accidentally pull him. You should need about half the room with this boss because he does fill the room up with flames, so just be aware of that. This boss is going to cycle between 3 phases. He's going to forge a weapon for each phase. The first one he'll forge is the axe, and that is going to basically just target a random person and put a big cone of fire at that person. So you want to bait that off into a corner just like we did. If you bait it in the wrong spot, you're going to fill the room with fire. It's going to be harder. The second weapon he's going to do are the swords. The swords are just basically a tank buster, as well as it's going to put a small dot. Actually, it's a pretty large dot on, I believe it's 3 people. And these people are going to drop fire after this dot expires. This is definitely an ability that I could see being nerfed in the future, just based on how they've handled other bosses with mechanics like this, where likely 1 or 2 people are going to get that debuff instead of 3. But as of right now, it is 3. It's quite oppressive, so just make sure you're putting extra heals on those people. And if you have a personal defensive, that is the perfect time to use it. The next one he's going to forge is the mace, which, sorry, I kind of just talked through, but the mace is the easiest one for like everybody else to deal with other than the tank. He's just going to chase the tank, and as he chases, fire is going to go under his footsteps, and he's going to fill the room. So the tank just has to be very strategic of where they kite the boss so that they're not filling the room with fire. And as you can see, the fire does grow as well. So this room can fill up very quickly if you don't do this properly. In terms of the damage, this boss does quite a bit of damage, but it's nothing too bad. I found, unfortunately, for Totemic, your Surging Totem window was not... Sorry, your Surging Totem cooldown is not small enough that you can use the Surging Totem window for each and every forge weapon. So whenever he forges a weapon, which seems to be about every 15 seconds or so, it's going to do group-wide AoE damage. So what I found when I had a little bit more practice and got good at this fight, I would basically... use a Surging Totem window for one forge weapon, and then I would use a small throughput cooldown for the next one, and then just cycle back and forth between that, and that was more than enough to handle. Other than that, like I said, the only damage that he's going to be doing is during the sword phase, where you just have to watch the tank a little bit extra, and then you have to watch the people who get the dots, which by themselves, you don't need any cooldown or anything special to deal with that, especially if people are using their personal defensives during that when they get the dot, which they should be. However, there can be an overlap where he's forging a weapon and people have dots on them. So that is another area where you'd probably use a throughput cooldown or a sling or something like that. All in all, though, not a terribly difficult boss. Just kind of, it's more annoying than anything because, like I said, the room fills up with fire. But as long as your tank knows what you're doing and the rest of the group baits the axe mechanic, which is the big cone in front of them, you should be more than fine with this boss. I also found, which is a nice tip, however, I don't know if it was actually working. It was just it looked like it was working. If you use Earthbind Totem on the boss, it does show that he has the slow debuff. I don't know actually if it was slowing him down, but it's you know what I mean. Just because there's no cost to you whatsoever until it's verified whether it works or not. unless you're like testing it out yourself. If you do, please let me know in the comments if you figure it out. But until you know whether or not it's actually working, I would say spend the global on dropping Earthbind during the mace phase when he is basically chasing the tank. And that's just going to make it easier for your tank to avoid him if it actually is slowing him down. All right, and then after this boss, we're just basically going to clear the rest of the room. Like I said, depending on the group that you're with, you may clear the entire room first before engaging the boss. It's likely going to depend on who has what cooldowns and when, and you're going to want to engage the boss when you're able to do the most damage to him. But going back to these packs, like I said, these are very dangerous packs. Do not be afraid to use throughput cooldowns, defensives, Spirit Link, whatever you can to survive. Because if somebody dies here and they have to run back, it's just going to make the pack that much harder because you're going to be down an interrupt, down a CC, down a DPS, and it just makes it a lot more stressful. Also, just be watching. So the Giant does the Molten Wake, which, like I said earlier, is that like big AoE damage ability that is going to hurt everyone in the group. It actually puts a debuff on everybody too that increases the fire damage that everybody takes. And what is annoying about that is the casters are doing fire damage, right? So if you're not careful, the debuff from the Molten Wake from the Giant is just going to make somebody else get one shot by one of the other trash abilities. So just be aware of that and be careful. All right, moving into the next section. This is probably the hardest section of the dungeon. Actually, no, that's a lie. It only gets like harder from here, but this is the start of like the hardness, if you will. And that is because the warlocks are going to cast curses on everybody. And it's not like 1 or 2 curses. They're casting like 3 or 4 curses, especially if there's multiple of them. They can target the same person like with multiple curses, or they can just put a curse on the entire group. So unfortunately, we only have 1 curse to spell. So at least that helps you handle 1 person. But it is very useful to have multiple people in the group with curse to spell. So if you're running with a mage or another like a shaman DPS, that will make your life a lot easier for this part of the dungeon. The curses, what they do is they put a giant health absorb on whoever they hit. And it's massive. So if you remember Throne of the Tides, that dungeon, which oddly enough was another Cataclysm dungeon that was also very, very challenging. If you remember the Crushing Depths cast that I think they were called Sentinels in the very first area of the dungeon did. It was like a 2 million health absorb or something like that, especially on higher keys. These curses are all like that, basically. Like they aren't all as strong as that, but they are very close. So there's no possible way, even if you blew a bunch of cooldowns, that you're going to heal through all of these curses continuously. Your only option is to dispel. This is also a great point for people who have like stone form. So if your group is full of dwarves, that makes it a lot easier. But otherwise, what I found the best way to handle the curses is dispel what you can and then pump all of your heals into one person who you know you're not going to dispel, right? So if 3 curses go out, you dispel 1, pick 1 person to heal, and then hopefully whoever else has a curse to spell dispels the other person, or you wait until your curse to spell is back up and you dispel that 3rd person. The goal is to not pump heals into a bunch of different curses when you know at least 1 or 2 of them are going to be dispelled eventually, right? You want to pick 1 person, pump the heals, and then dispel the others. Additionally, for this section, don't pull extra trash like I did. Like if you weren't watching and were just listening to me talking, you probably didn't see me do that. But I did not, and it's only because I didn't know at the time. But if you're planning on skipping this pack in the corner here, you have to be right on the lip of that chasm there, right? So you have to be right on the edge so you can sneak past. If you're even a little bit off of it, which I was, you're going to pull the pack off in the corner, which sucks. I didn't really discuss this, but the timer in this dungeon is super tight currently. Like it's a long dungeon. It's very hard. This is a dungeon where you can't really afford to wipe even once, especially with the way that they've changed how deaths work. So deaths now make you lose 15 seconds on your timer rather than 5, which is what it's been for a long time. So deaths are very crappy to have at any point, and this dungeon is very dangerous. So you're likely to have at least a few deaths. So because of that change and just how tight this dungeon is in general, you have to be very careful. And if you wipe, you're probably not going to time on higher keys. I'm sure on lower keys you'll be fine. But so unfortunately, we did just wipe there, kind of like it was like a half, 3/4 wipe. At least they kept the pull alive. But that was pretty much it for us. We're out of time at this point. You need like at least 16, 17 minutes, I think, starting at this point. But anyways, sorry. So that was me pulling and ruining the dungeon. But thankfully, just a beta key. So we're continuing on. So other guys to worry about in this area are the The Beguilers, which are actually in the last area as well, they're going to do a big purple frontal out, and they're also going to put a stacking debuff on the tank, I believe. It's more important to stop the stacking debuff that goes on the tank because it's the Shadow Flame slash that you see right there, as that is going to really, really truck the tank. Like, it does a crap ton of damage to them. The frontal is just something you can avoid. So if you have stops, CC, stuns, knockups, whatever, you want to use it on the tank buster, not on the frontal. The enforcers are also just going to do damage to the tank. I don't think they actually do anything else to the group. Just, watch out for them. And then you have the lava benders. So the lava benders are cool because they're kind of like shamans, but they're very annoying. And there's also a bug with them currently, which you're about to see in a second because I died to it. What they're going to do 3 abilities. They're going to do one giant lava beam that is very wide. It's easy to avoid if you see it coming out right away, but there's been a bug where they start casting it, but you don't actually see the line until they're like a second away from doing their cast, which is very annoying because you don't really have, and there you see it right there. So that actually didn't show up until he was like 3/4 done his cast. So if that if that bug is still a thing at live, what you're going to want to do is watch where he's facing when he starts to cast that, because he will cast it in the direction he's facing. The other ability he's going to do is like I forget what it's called. It's like a dark flame something. Everything's called dark flame in this, or shadow flame, or whatever. Everything is the flame and shadow in this dungeon. But anyways, he's gonna cast circles on everybody. So you just need to spread out and get ready to heal people. It's also a great point to make sure people are not so low that the circle is going to kill them. And you'll see more as we go on. There's actually a bunch of lava benders here. The third ability that's probably the most dangerous, if not handled correctly, is at 50% they ascend. They basically cast their own version of Ascendance, and they are going to do massive AoE pulsing damage to the group until they die. And it only gets worse and worse as they go. So basically what this means as a mechanic for the group is once the lava benders ascend, you need to focus them down ASAP. Otherwise, they're just going to kill the group. And of course, in good old fashioned Cataclysm dungeon ridiculousness fashion, there are 2 lava benders together at the end of this section. So that is always fun. I think with this group, we killed them, but if not, it is a pack that you can skip. So if we skip them in this one, I'll just explain what we did for other groups where we handled it. It's pretty simple. Here we go. And enveloping shadow. No, sorry, that's the curse. But anyways, you saw right there, that's the circle that the lava bender does that you need to spread out for. And what's difficult with these lava benders is you're pulling them with warlocks in a lot of these packs, and the warlocks are the ones who are putting the curses on people. So you can imagine if you're dealing with any of the damaging abilities that these lava benders do, and you also get curses coming out, it's going to be somewhat difficult to keep people alive if you're unable to dispel them right away. So, like I said, the more curse dispels you have, the better. All right, as you can see, very spicy, very, very, very spicy. We even killed that one fairly fast, but it just does so much damage. And like I said, this is only a 12. Like a 12, sure, it's high, but it's not like people are going to be timing 13s and 14s. This is probably going to be the dungeon, like I said, until nerfs happen, which I'm sure they will. But this is going to be the dungeon where it's like 1 or 2 key levels lower than all the other ones that are able to do. 1, because of the time limit, but 2, just because of the damage that these packs do. And you'll notice actually none of the bosses have been super difficult. And this upcoming boss is also not a hard one, I would say. It's only the last boss for this dungeon that's actually what I would say is fairly difficult, which kind of sucks because, like I said, this dungeon is such a slog that if you make it to the end with enough time to kill that last boss, and then you die to the last boss and don't time the key, it's just going to feel very, very rotten. But it's also going to feel that much better if you do time it. So it looks like we do pull the 2 lava benders here. Best way to handle this is to mark one with skull and just burn it down. Right? Because if you get both of these guys ascending at the same time, it's game over. You're toast. Or, I mean, you're going to have to pop all of your cooldowns and hope that you live, which sucks because you're going into a boss right after this. But that being said, if this is the scenario where the only way to survive is to pop every single cooldown that you have, just do it. You'll probably be fine with this upcoming boss. It only will really hurt on like really high keys, where the boss is doing more damage than you would expect. But as on average, like even on a 12, this next boss coming up is not that bad. But see, so we handled that pretty perfectly. You basically just burn one down. You just don't want them to ascend at the same time because they are going to do a lot of damage if both of them are doing their AoE casts. Okay, Dark Eruption there, finally. I actually read it when it was happening. So Dark Eruption is where the circles go on everybody. And once again, does quite a bit of damage, so just be careful. Okay, this next boss is interesting in the sense that it's a mini boss first. So you're going to get him down to about 50% or so, or maybe even, I think you actually get him down to 1%. And then he's going to jump off and he's going to ride a dragon back up. The abilities that you deal with in phase 1, which is like the mini boss phase, you're basically just going to be dealing with more when he jumps on his dragon. So he's going to do 2 main abilities really in phase 1. He's going to summon this ad, which is called the Shadow Flame Spirit, and that is going to target one person and basically chase them down. If it catches them, it's going to kill everybody in the group. So whoever is targeted has to run away. Everybody else can do whatever they can to slow down the ad, but basically your ultimate goal is to kill that ad before it reaches the other person. The other ability he's going to do is he's going to put a curse on everybody, curse of entropy. And sorry, it's not everybody, it's 3 people. And that is a curse that is going to do, it's going to put a health absorb on the person, and it's also going to slow them down. Oddly enough, it actually doesn't do any damage, so you don't have to worry about like leaving it on somebody. However, what I would say is because it slows them down, if the person who's targeted by the ad also gets targeted by one of those curses, you're obviously going to want to dispel that person. Because it is a snare, like it's a curse that slows people down, I'm assuming Jetstream, which is the talent, the Windrush talent that removes snares, will work for it. However, I didn't get a chance to test it. And like I said, the curse isn't really that dangerous because it doesn't actually do any damage. So if anybody else wants to test it, once again, let us know in the comments if you find it to work. I'm sure I will test it as well once it's live, but it's just, even if it does work, it's not like super important to have. I think on really, really high keys, you will maybe want it, but even for this key, it's not so bad, especially if you have more than 1 decurse. So in phase 2, the dragon comes out, we get 2 more abilities, and it just, everything becomes a little bit harder. So first, instead of 1 ad, you're going to get 2. So 2 people are going to get chased down. Unfortunately, basically it just means you have to kill both ads instead of 1, and make sure that you slow them down. Sometimes they spawn together, which is really nice, so you can put down your Earthbind and it'll actually hit both of them. But other times they spawn at like opposite ends of the room, so you just, you have to be careful and play it by ear. Second, he's going to do a new ability called Twilight Buffet. This is just going to be a group-wide AoE that pushes everybody back. So if you're being chased down by a flame guy, just make sure you don't get knocked back into it, because once again, you'll wipe the group. There's also going to be these little fire tornadoes that spawn, and they're just going to be, as you can see, whirling around the room as the boss fight goes on. Nothing too scary. However, it is something you can get knocked back into by the Twilight Buffet, so just be careful of that. They're actually the same flame animation that was on Farak if you did that boss from the Emergisil raid. However, I don't think they hurt as much. And then lastly, the other ability that he adds in phase 2 is just a frontal that targets the tank, which you can see right here, the Devouring Flame. So the tank can strategically place that so it's not targeting people. However, even if it does target you, it's pretty slow, so just move out of the way and you should be fine. And thankfully, this boss dies at 50%. If you are a Cataclysm player, you'll remember that Valiona, which is the dragon here, is actually one of the raid bosses from the Bastion of Twilight raid, I believe. So yeah, get the dragon to 50% and move on. This next pack is quite difficult. You have a lot of crap in here that you don't like. Mainly warlocks. You have at least 2 warlocks in here. They're going to be casting their curses as well as bolts, and then you have the dudes from the second area who are casting the Searing Flame, which is going to be stunning anybody that it casts on, as well as casting their own bolts. You've got the enforcers with the tank busters. Basically, nasty pack all around. Just make sure that if you can, like I said, that boss isn't too hard, so if you can save a cooldown for this, that is your best bet at handling it. Otherwise, once again, just have a lot of decurses and pray people are using their defensives when they should be. Okay, so, and then after this, like I said, it doesn't get any easier, unfortunately. There is another Twilight Destroyer, which is the dragon from the first area. Thankfully, there's a nice and easy LOS spot. You can go into any of these little nooks and crannies, which you'll see me do. However, you are still dealing with the Twilight Flame, which right now, as you can see, Riley has it. And that is going to make them drop purple stuff on the ground. Once again, this purple stuff, extremely dangerous. It does not take a second to tick. It ticks immediately when you step on it, and it does a ton of damage. So make sure you're not getting knocked back into that. Make sure you're not walking through it. And if you get targeted with the Twilight Flame, make sure you're dropping it in a reasonable spot. It's also a good spot to pop a defensive if it does happen on you, so that way you're not in too much danger if you accidentally stand in the puddle that you drop and take a tick or 2. Okay, these next guys, the Corruptors and the little mini dudes next to them. So the Corruptors, which is the big guy here, he's going to cast something called Mind Pierce. It's going to target one person and just do a shit ton of damage on that person. It's like an insane dot. If you've seen my Dawnbreaker video, it's like even worse than the dots that those trash guys put on. And to make things even better or worse, depending on whether you like a challenge or not, these small guys, whenever they die, they will put a stacking debuff on everybody that increases shadow damage taken. So if you have that debuff and you're also taking the Mind Pierce, it's bad news for you. So this, unfortunately, and like I said, the next boss is really hard too. So you want to try and save cooldowns for the next boss if you can, but you have to do some cooldowns here to get through this. Slink is your best friend. Any abilities like AMZ, like you saw pop there, are really good. People should be having a personal defensive if they get the dot. However, if they get 2 in a row, then that's a good spot to really focus in on them. All in all, I really like Totemic for this dungeon, but because of the single target that Bars here offers, I think that might be the play just for this one area because it's so stressful. And at the very last pull before the last boss, you actually have 2 of them. So it's crazy. I also see this getting nerfed at some point. There's no way. Actually, I mean, I don't know. With the other Cataclysm dungeons, Throne of the Tides especially, they didn't really nerf a lot of it. They kept it really difficult. So I could see them keeping this, but I'm assuming that at some point they're probably going to nerf this just because it is pretty crazy. But yeah, as long as you can sit there and spam single target heals and not run out of mana, you should be good. Remember to be using your Earth Surge windows as best you can. Don't forget about your Water Moat, which is going to duplicate your Healing Surge or Healing Wave to somebody who's in your Healing Rain after you cast Surging Totem. You're going to need to use all of these special tools in order to get through this part. Okay, next boss, we'll start talking about that. So the next boss is Arudax, the Duke of the Below. Pretty cool title. He's basically a giant guy who is going to do a lot of stuff that hurts a lot and is very annoying. So I actually think it's really cool what they did compared to Cataclysm. Like they took this boss from Cataclysm and they changed it, but still kept the same vibe and the same, like somewhat the same flavor of abilities, which is really cool. So if you played Cataclysm, you'll remember this boss did like a shadow hurricane, and basically you had to stand in the eye of the hurricane, otherwise you would take a lot of damage. So that is still the same. However, the way it happens is very cool. They basically make it like a mystery. So he casts the hurricane and you kind of see where the winds start closing in, and that gives you an indication of where the eye is going to be. So as a group, you sort of have to make your way to the eye. But there's a catch. He puts a ton of tentacles on the ground all over the place. And if you step in any of these tentacles, you are like point blank stunned. It's not like a route where you can maybe get out of it with like something like Spirit Walk, which is, to be honest, that's what it should have been. It makes more sense because then more people could deal with it if they do get hit. It's actually a flat out stun. So if you get hit, best of luck. You're probably going to die, to be frank. Hopefully you have a B-res available if that does happen. And I'm pretty sure it does happen to me and somebody else in this fight. So yeah, you'll get to see me screwed up firsthand. But I did find, so this is, keep in mind, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier in the video, but this is probably like my second or third time doing this, especially on anything higher than a 10, which at a 10 you can somewhat ignore the mechanics, or not ignore, but they're just much more forgiving. So once I got better at this boss, I did it this time. I think I practiced it one other time. It became much easier to sort of avoid the tentacles and just like be comfortable with your footing. Other than that, there are a few crazy damage phases, and the group has to be super coordinated in how they kill a certain ad or a certain set of ads, which we'll go through. So he's going to cast Void Surge right off the bat. It might catch you by surprise the first time you do this, so just make sure that you are using your Surging Totem window like right away as the fight starts. You can even pop a throughput cooldown there. Either like if you're running the Short Ascendance, that's a great one to pop. AG obviously is a good one to pop, Ancestral Guidance, because it will be up. And then if you're running Short Healing Tide, you could also pop one of those. Basically, just don't pop Spirit Link because that's like a 3-minute cooldown, and you want to save that for when you really need it. All right, so after that, he is going to, as you saw, do the Eye of the Hurricane. You have to find out where the eye is, and then he is going to, once the eye is complete, he's going to put purple circles on 3 people, so you have to spread out in the limited space that you have, and those 3 people are going to take damage. If you're standing in any of the circles, you're going to take more damage as well, obviously. After that, he's going to summon these little ads, the hatchlings. They're the same ones from the previous trash packs we were just doing, meaning that once you kill them, you get a stacking debuff that makes you take more shadow damage. So if your group does not kill these at the right time, you're going to be taking a ton of extra shadow damage during one of his AoE abilities, mainly the Void Surge. It's just going to kill everyone. So you have a very short window of when you can actually kill these guys, which I'll go through when they get summoned again. So here you see the Hurricane again. We found the eye. We're going to be standing here. 3 people get circles. You just have to pump heals into them. It's a great spot to pop a cooldown if you need to. And then he's going to cast Void Infusion, which summons the ads. So you want to wait. You don't want to kill these ads right away. You need to wait until after he does the next Void Surge AoE. Because if you kill these guys too early, you're going to have that debuff for the Void Surge, which we did last time. But somehow we survived because I probably popped a massive cooldown. But anyways, Void Surge, this time I popped Healing Tide. If you can, save your throughput cooldowns for the Void Surges because you never know if you're going to get these ads to die and then people are taking more damage. Try not to use a cooldown during the eye phase when the 3 people have the circles. However, you don't want people to die either. So as you can see, what's really frustrating about this boss, the one thing I don't like is in order to find the eye, you have to turn your camera a little bit. And then the boss like completely covers up some of the tentacles. Like if you rewind that a little bit, the tentacle that I got hit, literally you can't see because the boss is standing on top of it. So that's the one thing I don't like about this boss is sometimes you can get kind of screwed over if you just don't see the tentacle because it's underneath the boss. But other than that, it's like clockwork. He just cycles through those few abilities. Like I said, the most dangerous part of this is accidentally killing these small ads well before or during the Void Surge because you're going to be taking a lot of extra damage. And unfortunately, the damage he does during the eye phase is also shadow damage, like the 3 circles that go on people. So if the ads stay up too long, then you're going to have that shadow damage debuff during that phase. So the ads basically need to die immediately after the Void Surge. Otherwise, you're going to carry the debuff into this shadow damage phase, which is just as dangerous. So this is a very tricky boss. They're going to have to nerf it at some point, just because so many groups, especially pugs, are going to struggle with coordinating how to kill those ads properly and when. People who are not in comms are not going to be able to coordinate that properly. I think an easy fix to this is to make it so that the ads, like the shadow debuff that the ads give you, just doesn't last as long, and that's just going to make your life easier because you don't have to worry about it, having the debuff for the eye phase where everybody's together and the purple circles come out. Yeah, so that was Grim Batol and me talking a whole lot. So I hope this video helped you out. And like I said at the very beginning of the guide, please let me know if you enjoyed this format better, where it's literally just me going through an entire walkthrough of a dungeon, or if you enjoy the format I did for the City of Threads guide, which is much more scripted and much more pared down, where I've kind of just like isolated mechanics that each pack does and mechanics that each boss does and then just showed them. They're very different styles and they require different levels of work. So let me know which one you find the most useful so that moving forward, I can continue to do, the one that everybody favors most. And then, going into the next seasons, I can sort of perfect that as well. But yeah, I appreciate your time. I hope this helped you out. Please leave a like, subscribe, whatever. Share with your friends if you think this is useful. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks.